Okay, hello everyone. So today, let's discuss all about elements or components of a curriculum design. So let us take a lesson plan as a minuscule curriculum. A lesson plan or a teaching guide includes, so take note number one, it includes intended learning outcomes or what we call ILO. The second one is desired learning outcomes or what we call DLO, or formally labeled as behavioral objectives. So, number two is the subject matter or the content of the lesson. So, this is the body of the lesson. Number three, the teaching and learning methods. So, how the teachers or the student will interact with each other and how the teacher will give teaching or strategies for his or her lessons. Number four is assessment evaluation. So the teacher will going to evaluate what the student will learn and how the student will interact about the lesson. Okay, the next slide, let's talk about what is behavioral objectives or intended learning outcomes, IL. So as a curriculum designer, the beginning of the learning journey is the learning outcomes to be achieved. In this way, both the learner and the teacher are guided by what to accomplish. So number one, they're going to express in action or words found and revised. This is according to Bloom's taxonomy of objectives. The development of cognitive skills. Number two, the behavioral objectives, intended learning outcomes, or desired learning outcomes are expressed in action words found in the revised Bloom's taxonomy of objectives. This is according to Anderson and Krathwohl 2003 for the development of cognitive skills. So meaning, if the teacher were going to teach, so they have their behavioral objectives or what we call intended learning outcomes. So what is their intended to give learnings to their student, their main goal to their students. Okay, the next slide here is informing learning outcomes. So it is good practice to first express each outcome in terms of what successful student will be able to do. So meaning, you're going to express each outcome. So, what will be the objective of your lessons? You're going to express for them and their outcomes. So, meaning it should be connected. Number two, include different kinds of outcomes. So, number one outcomes here is cognitive objectives. So, what is cognitive objectives? So, cognitive objectives talks about learning facts, theories, formulate, and principles. Another one is the performance outcome. So it talks about learning how to carry out procedures, calculations, and processes, which typically includes gathering information and communicating results. That is a different kinds of outcomes. The next slide talks about the content or the subject matter, meaning this is the body of the lesson, meaning the teacher will going to demonstrate, to teach, to discuss what the lesson would be. In selecting content, you should take note here. In selecting content, you should bear in mind the following principles in addition to those mentioned about the content in previous lessons. So the subject matter should be relevant to the outcome of the curriculum. So, of course, so from the beginning at the end of the lesson, it should be connected, right? Number two, subject matter should be appropriate to the level of the lesson or unit. So meaning, as what I've said, it should be connected. Dapat connected yung from the beginning of the lesson, kung ano yung diniscuss, until the end of the lesson, it should be connected, so that the student will easily understand what should be the beginning and the end of the lesson. Okay, the next one here is subject matter should be up to date and if possible should reflect current knowledge and concept. concept, meaning it should be knowledgeable. It is relevant. It's important to know, to take note for that. The next slide here is it talk about references. So we are familiar about references. So the references follows the content. It tells where the content or subject matter has been taken. The references may be a book, a module, or any publication. So we are very familiar about references. So these are example of this here is those person or people um, have their study and supported of that topic. So like for example here is number 1, Project Wild 1992, K-12 Activity Guide and Interdisciplinary Supplementary Conversation, and Environmental Education Program, Council of Environment Education, Bethesda, MD. So this is one of the example of references. So this kind of number 1 is example of a publication. Number 2 here example is Shipman, James, Jerry Wilson, year 2009, who introduced to physical science, Huffman to Bolton MA. So this is example of person who supported this study that talks about physical science. Okay, this is the reference example. Okay, the next slide here is talks about teaching and learning methods. So we are very familiar about strategies, methods. So these are the activities where the learners derive experiences. It is always good to keep in mind teaching strategies that student will experience. First, lecture, laboratory classes, fireworks, or experiments, so that the student will learn and have their experience about their lessons. So about teaching and learning methods, we are very familiar that teachers use different strategies, techniques when it comes to learnings, right? So that they can catch the attention of the students. So a sort of example here, cooperate learning activities allow students to work together, right? So some of the teachers have do groupings activities so that they can see the cooperation of the students to work together. Number 2 is independent learning activities allow learners to develop personal responsibility. So some teachers give activities individually so that we know personal responsibilities. We can be independent of our own. Next one is cooperative activities like groupings, where students will test their competencies against another in a healthy manner, allow learners to perform to their maximum. So by group to group performance. Okay, the various delivery modes to provide learning experience is recommended. That is true. Because if you learn, you have your experience, right? So that is the example of teaching and learning methods. Okay, the next one here is the assessment and evaluation, meaning the teacher will give assessment and evaluate the student to their performance. Learning occurs most effectively when students receive feedback, when they receive information on what they have already and have not learned. Okay, number 1 here is self-assessment, through which students learn to monitor and evaluate their own learning. So the teacher will give self-assessment so that they will know the student learnings and they will monitor, evaluate of what the student learned about the topic. Number 2 is peer assessment, in which students provide feedback on each and other's learnings. And lastly here is the teacher's assessment, meaning in which the teacher prepares and administers tests and gives feedback to the student performance. So as we have observed, teachers at the end of the lesson, the teacher were going to give assessment and evaluation to the student. If it is good, okay, or need to improve. That is evaluation. Okay. And the last slide here talks about application of the fundamental components of other curriculum. This is based on the curriculum models we have learned. The fundamental components includes, so it's a summary. So our topic is the major components of course designs or the syllables here. Number one, we already discussed about intended outcomes. So what is intended outcomes? So this is the objectives of the topic. Number two here is the content or the subject matter. So as what I have said, the content or the subject matter is the body of the lesson, which they have references, supported topic, and the third one is method strategies, which needed resources. So we talks about teachers and students, about what the teacher's going to do or what strategies student will do, so that the student will have their experience about the lesson. And the last one here is the evaluation, means of assessment. So meaning the teacher will evaluate, will assess the student on how the student learn about the topic. So that is the evaluation. So I think that's all. So I hope you have learned about the topic, and thank you so much for listening. Have a great day, guys.